Hello, everybody, and welcome to Riftbound Ramblings. I'm your host, Barrett, and today is December 8th, 2025. I have just got back from Houston, Texas for the first ever English Riftbound Regional Qualifier, and oh my goodness, it was an absolute blast. If you're new to the channel, this is a news and recaps channel where I normally go over card reveals, other updates in organized play, and event coverage. So, if you saw the event this weekend on the stream, I really appreciate it. I hope it was a good time, and I hope you felt a little bit of FOMO because I want to see you at the next one. Of course, I was one of the commentaries and basically played host this weekend, and I had the privilege to meet a million of people that I would not otherwise get the opportunity to see, and I really appreciate it. That being said, we're going to go ahead and do a recap of the event as a whole, and so I have some photos here, of course, of the event and the stage, and then, of course, our winner, Diwali himself, piloting that Annie list. Now, we're going to go over some information for the meta breakdown in case you missed it on the stream or on socials, and I'll give a little bit of opinions as well. And then we're going to go over every single deck list for the best of winners. I think that's a better way to do it instead of a top 8. I think people really realize that these metallic champion cards are going to be really, really good to go after. So going forward, I think it is meaningful to see what people are doing for attacking the format and the meta with each legend and then picking the ones out that are the winners. So, without further ado, we're going to dive in. So, for the legend breakdown, this is what we had. Only 33% Kai'Sas, and I say only in a good way because at other events that we've seen throughout the year and in the set 1 format, it has been much larger than that, at least for the biggest deck in the room. And then right after that, 15%, 11%, and then obviously the single digits for everything below it. And that means handed in deck lists, there was 1,123 players here. Tickets sold and competitor badges, I believe, was upwards to like 1,300. But obviously, on the day of, in the morning on Saturday, not everyone showed up, and because of that, this is what the final number of the actual event ended up being broken down to. So all in all, I think things have kind of leveled out. And of course, Annie is the talk of the town now for being this deck that a lot of Western players have brought to try and attack the Kai'Sa problem. And it worked out, obviously. If you were paying attention to the event, Annie did end up winning the whole thing. And Kai'Sa actually didn't even break out of top 8, which I think is really, really interesting going forward on what we're going to end up doing as a game as a whole and as a format. But of course, the next major event that English players will be playing in is going to be Spirit Forge based. So maybe this is kind of a moot point. Moving on to the top 64. Again, all the numbers on the left here of number of decks is that day 1 number that we just broke down. But now with day 2 conversions, essentially, we have 27 Kai'Sas, 11 Ys, 11 Annies, 7 Misfortune, 3 Teemos, singletons of Victor, Yasuo, Darius, Lee Sin, and Volibear, and no Ahris, Set, Leonas, Jinx, Lux, Garen's made it to day 2. I don't think that's very surprising if you look at the bottom of those, but Set not making any conversions to day 2, I think, is very interesting with 56 people bringing it to the tournament. Only 56 is low, don't get me wrong, but I do believe with the success that we saw from Set a couple of weeks ago in some 10K, 12Ks, it is just interesting that maybe not as many people represented it. And Ahri's even made some conversions to day 2 and didn't make any at this event. That, of course, Lee Sin, Volibear, Yasuo, Darius is exciting. 1 Victor makes sense. 3 Teemos makes sense to me. And Misfortune was even our Swiss champ, actually, being the first seed for day 2. But, I mean, other than that, I think this breakdown kind of makes sense. And now we are going to dive into each of the best of deck lists. So in order of their final placement, we're going to go over. So the winner of the event was Annie, played by Diwali, of course, and I'm sure everyone's going to go through deck analysis, so I'm going to kind of keep these a little bit brief, especially for these higher end ones. But essentially, this is the bread and butter on why the Annie deck is going to be so good, is because it has these kind of combat tricks to protect yourself against the Annie deck, and it is so aggressive out the get-go. You're able to get points early on because of things like Sneaky Deckhand. You're able to move things around with Ride the Wind, avoid some counterplay because of cards like Gust. Pouty Poros make your Kai'Sa players play the deflect costs and go a little bit further behind. And then, of course, we have the Vi Ride the Wind play that is so powerful at the late game. You basically only have to ever get to 6 points, and then you can win the game right out the get-go. Also, what you see a lot of these decks do is they always usually start Zon Warrens for game 1 with the Scrapheaps in the main board, and then basically what most players do is for games 2 and 3, you side out the Scrapheaps and you put in whatever of your other sideboard pieces are a little bit better. We saw Rebuke be a really big player this weekend, not just one main board, but the 2 in the sideboard, because it can't get defied, and so it was very, very strong against any of the Calm decks. And yeah, I mean, watching Diwali play this deck was absolutely masterful, and I really, really push you to go watch him play against Kaisa in top 8 against Alan ZQ. It was the most hype moment of the weekend in my honest opinion. Moving on, we've got the Best of Master Yi, which is of course was our second place deck played by Blarg, and this deck was beautiful. Honestly, I think this is where I found myself being very favorited for Master Yi in the format of being this dazzling deck that's able to sideboard out of it. Being able to play Stalwart Poros and Clockwork Keepers and such in your sideboard and still be the good Master Yi deck that's still going to play White Flame Protectors and Deadbloom Predators while still having all this counterplay. The main boarded Windwall, I think, is genius. I think even one main board Sabotage is great, siding a second one of each the Windwall and the Sabotage. This deck was honestly great. I thought Blarg was such a great player. We got to highlight quite a bit of Master Yi. It was just later into the tournament, and I'm loving, loving, loving the main boarded 2 copies of Rune Prison. I really think this is where a lot of the Master Yi decks are going to, go towards. And being able to main board or pick Vilemaw's Lair as one of your battlefields, I think is very smart when Annie is going to be running around. Master Yi is meant to be the Annie gatekeeper. Even though it lost in the finals here, I don't think Master Yi is going anywhere. Next up is the 5th place Alan ZQ's Kaisa list, who we got to watch quite a bit this weekend, whether it was playing Time Warps for winning games versus not playing Time Warps. This deck was masterful. We saw an incredible reason why Smokescreen is a 3 of in this deck, and I really, really recommend go watching Alan play this deck in the multiple times we were able to highlight him on the stream. He is a great player, masterful, and he's cool as a cucumber every time he plays. We saw the incredible use of Candlelit Sanctum. I think a lot more people are going to maybe be looking at that battlefield as the value battlefield when it comes to decks like Kaisa that are already drawing so many cards. But we've talked a lot about Kaisa in the past. I don't think there's anything new here, but Alan is mainboarding triple Void Seeker when I think a lot of decks did shy away from it, and it makes a lot of sense. But of course, he said he has respect for all of the Dazzling decks, and that's why there's the 2 Thermo Beams in the side. Great deck. Was great to watch him play this, and it was a ton of fun. Next up is our Best of Teemo. And surprise, surprise, it's actually not Prismaticism. It is Gorica that got 36th place here. And we had Prismaticism give us a little bit more insight on Teemo as a whole and a content piece that happened during the stream. But all in all, I'm kind of starting to love and fall in love with Teemo in general, because I think why Chaos is very powerful at trying to combat against Kaisa decks is really showcasing in things like Teemo and Annie. Fight or Flight being very strong, Ride the Wind being very strong, and still having late game pieces that we all know are powerful, like Thousand-Tailed Watcher. And Dr. Mundo goes a long way in this deck for, being an answer that card that a lot of decks can't find an answer to. One mainboard Flash is also very masterful, and again, those rebukes in the sideboard really, really matter when you play against those calm decks because of the defies. So Best of Teemo going here to Gorica. Moving on, we've got one of the biggest talks of the town, honestly, is the only Volibear that ended up making it to day 2, given to us by Malix, or Malik X. In 47th place was their final finishing spot, and we did get to highlight this deck in day 1 and also in day 2. Of course, they ended up losing to the winner of the whole tournament, Diwali, and this deck was fantastic to watch. Sky Splitters in the main board came a long way. Anivia being one of these other strong, powerful cards you can get off the Dazzling Aurora, and even the one of Magma Worm came in a game that I was watching, and it felt very, very powerful, to be honest. Iron Ballistas were great for playing early to keep some of the weaker units against Annies or even Kaisas off of the board when they wanted to go and take points. And Incinerate was kind of, honestly, not that bad. I don't think that card's very strong generally, but it is cheaper than Void Seeker at the end of the day, and it does still get the job done like Iron Ballista. And when you have both of them, it does help remove even 4 might units like Kaisa Survivors. So we even had the Stormbringers here in the sideboard, which is really nice, and I even like the Warwicks that can help get the job done against other wide decks. So great job, Malik. Congrats on your Metallic Volibear. And for anyone else that's like Volibear, you can take a look at this list. Next up is our best of Yasuo, given to us by Gale Wins, the only Yasuo to make day 2. And I didn't get really a chance to really deep dive into this list, but I had a friend of mine who brought Yasuo, and it looked a little different than this, and it makes more sense on why Gale had a lot of success going into this day 2 and getting here in the first place. Lots of 1-ups in this list, as you can see, it even goes down to the 4th line. You know, Rasa comes in clutch for this deck a lot because it is a 6 might unit that can essentially be free for you later on in the game because your cards are just going to hit the discard pile anyway. This is even doing the Zon Warrens plus Scrapheap main boarded for like game 1, and then of course you can get them out of there and gain ganking for Windswept Hilllock in conjunction with Yasuo's ability. It's just a really powerful battlefield choice. Love Tide Turner. But obviously, the biggest thing you can note here is that this is not doing the Kane shenanigans that a lot of people do enjoy, and instead takes advantage of very powerful hand hack cards like Mindsplitter, and is just trying to get on the battlefields early with a lot of these low-costed cards. Makes sense, looks like a great list, and it was a ton of fun to see Yasuo make a day 2. Next up is Lee Sin, and man, this deck was so fun to watch. Given to us by Jeff Jones, very prolific Yu-Gi-Oh player, as well as designer for Argent Saga. 52nd place, and immediately out the get-go got an offer for his Metallic Lee Sin that I don't want to talk about how much it was, but regardless, this deck was so fun to watch on stream because the 1x Dragon's Rage is basically sometimes like worst case scenario, just another copy of Charm. But the fun part is that it can also function as removal. But in the words of Jeff Jones, the reason why you never play more than one is because if your opponent will never fall for the second one. Once you play it once, it's kind of like a gotcha moment during the match, and then basically after that, they're never going to set themselves up to be in a position for it. Of course, Deadbloom Predators, Tasty Faithful, it's kind of just doing your own little Master Yi impersonation, but Lee Sin gets a lot of value and helps you play your curve out really, really well. And even the Sunlit Guardians, being, yes, it's only a 3 might unit, but on turn 2, going first, you have the 3 to play the Sunlit, and then we saw Jeff Jones buff it with Lee Sin, putting it to that 4 might threshold to survive against only 1 trigger of a Falling Stars, really meant a lot against things like Kaisa. So this deck's pretty cool, really big fan. Next up is Victor, the only one that made it into day 2, 56th place by Gambit01. And yeah, I mean, it's very much just how do I make as many recruits as possible, really taking advantage of Trifarian War Camp with a lot of units, and then still being able to play huge removal pieces like Riptide Rex and Singularity, and even Thousand-Tailed Watcher, of course. I think one of the other biggest things to highlight is all the removal, of course, that we know about the Order, Domain, Hidden Blades, Cold of Weeks, and even in the sideboard are those Imperial Decrees. So all in all, I think this list is pretty standard. I think some people will be like, oh, there's only one Lecturing Yordle. Maybe we want some more draw, but I think the list gets the job done pretty well. And Victor, not having a lot of representation, of course, as it's kind of fallen off, but here is the one that went home with the metal card. Next up, we got Darius, given to us by Pushp, 57th place, of course. I think they've already talked about their list online and everything, but I still wanted to put it here. I'm not really going to go super deep then, but this was the only one that made it to day 2, and it is a baited hook Darius, of course, and just being able to take advantage of having the Order Domain to have at least a little bit of removal, but because you still have the Fury Domain, being able to main board Falling Stars went a long way when we got to watch a deck like this on stream. Of course, extra Imperial Decree in the sideboard. I'm a big fan of cards like Vayne, and I love even having things like Shen in the sideboard as well. Really love this deck. Sadly, I think Darius might get pushed out by Rek'Sai going into Spirit Forge, but I could be wrong because I think just having some extra energy because of the Legion ability on Darius might go a long way. But we even saw, like on stream, we didn't really use it a whole lot of the time, to be honest. So maybe not. Who knows? Next up is Ahri. We've officially moved down to the best of prizings that didn't make it to day 2, but I was still able to grab a lot of these deck lists, and so we're going to try and talk about them. So in 98th place, we have Kale, given to us, his name's Caleb, and this is the Ahri list that ended up making it. It's pretty similar to some of the Ahri lists we've seen before, but only mainboarding the 2 time warps instead of like a 3. But it makes sense because you don't want to see too many of them. But really also playing the Sona here to be able to play a lot of these cards on our opponent's turns, such as, retreats, on guard, stupefy, defy, and etc. Even Windwall helps out, right, when you have a Sona. Tasty Feyfolk keeps us accelerated on runes, functions as an accelerate lunate like Thousand-Tailed Watcher. And in the sideboard, having a different Ahri that you could potentially go into aside from the green one, and then even one X copy of Foxfire and Mystic Reversal and Dr. Mundo. Again, we see this Ahri list not mainboarding charms, which I think makes sense, but sideboarding them I think is a smart call because in some decks it really does matter to get onto the battlefield by moving your opponent's units away or forcing your opponent's units into yours to fight. So here we go. This is the Metallic Ahri deck. Now, sadly, everybody, yes, this is a blank slide. This is the only list I couldn't get a hold of in time today, and I hope that Charmander XX1 will give us their set list because this is the only one that I don't have access to, but they ended up getting 110th place and getting the set Metallic, and set's my favorite legend, and not having access to this deck makes me a little sad, but regardless, congratulations, and I hope to see your list online here soon. Next up, we've got the best of Jinx for 130th place. And the funniest thing about this one, if everyone wasn't aware, Jim Davis was going after this as well. And it was a 3-way tie at 6-3 to get the Metallic Jinx. And Eric Liu ended up taking it home, which was very strong and very good for their achievements. Of course, this is pretty straightforward, except for the fact that we're playing the Jinx Rebel, which when we saw Jim Davis play the deck, it was more about having the Accelerate unit and, like blowing your hand away, cycling all your runes for the Flame Chompers when you pitch them. But Jinx Rebel being kind of the focus here instead, it tells a very different story on like what's going on for this deck. Of course, with the Super Mega Death Rockets as well, Unlicensed Armory, very unique things that Jinx gets to take advantage. And then, of course, because we have the Fury Domain, we are still able to do things like Kai'Sa Survivor, Darius Trifarian being very powerful abilities. We are still mainboarding 2 Vi and 2 Ride the Wind, of course. There's a 3rd Vi in the sideboard, and we even have things like Sneaky Deckhand, and again, Rebukes being a really big deal against the Calm decks in the format. So congratulations, Eric, on taking home that Metallic Jinx. Moving on, we've got Riftbound T's 156th place Garen, and yeah, that's right. It's not even, I think, our last place legend deck, unless I skipped one over. But yeah, we saw this one on stream on day 1, and it was so fun to watch this deck in action because basically, for everyone at home, it's not even really a Garen deck. The Garen legend ability never matters because this is a Dazzling Aurora list. But the benefit is that if you do a Dazzling Aurora list with the Order Domain, you're able to take advantage of cards like Divine Judgment. Once you get the Dazzling onto the board, you're really only going to have 1 unit, maybe 2 if you draw it later. But then Divine Judgment being able to reset both of you and your opponent back to square one, and your opponent is basically not going to be able to deal with your Dazzling Auroras and their units as well. It's obviously kind of high rolly because you have to find these cards and you don't necessarily have the most ways of drawing, and we saw that kind of happen sometimes with the list, but it was so fun to see this in action, and it makes me wonder if people will attempt this even with set, and set being able to maybe just play like a couple of cards that buff your units so that you can even keep your dazzling units alive. I'm very interested to try something like this out, or maybe even for multiplayer. But congratulations, Riftbound T. You came here for the Garen medal card against 12 other players, and you did end up taking it home. Moving on, we've got the Best of Lux. This is given to us by Ryan Empire. Got 167th place here, and I had to build this deck on my own. I didn't know what the list looked like, but I had to put it into Piltover. So as you can see here, very widespread different things that I've seen from other Lux lists. But I know a lot of people are trying to incorporate Lux and be kind of like an anti-Kai'Sa list. So the late game spells, or the ones that we get to draw off of course, are Falling Comet, Blast of Power, Singularity, Recruit the Vanguard, Unchecked Power out of 3 of, Final Spark, and a single Time Warp. So we're going to be drawing a bunch of cards when we do play those spells, but still playing even late game units like Harness Dragon and having to Recruit the Vanguard and make some recruits, but still maintaining the early game with Soaring Scouts, Watchful Sentries, this powerful combination we know that Victor gets to play. Only one Consult the Past. I do think drawing cards is pretty advantageous for this deck. But yeah, the triple unchecked power I think is probably one of the real ways this deck takes a lot of games. Being able to have these answers of removal. I mean, you probably have a great Dazzling matchup, is what I can imagine. But I wonder how it goes against even like anti decks of just being so quick to get out. And it makes sense on why we're playing things like Aspirant's Climb. But Grand Plaza here as one of the battlefields on the alt win condition, it makes sense because we make a bunch of recruits because we even side in a second Machine Evangel. But I wonder how successful it has been, and I'd have to ask them myself. But they took home the Lux, and they got offered a lot of money for it. So congrats to Ryan Empire. Next up is our last legend. It's the best of Leona, and I'm glad I was able to do this one last, not just because of placement of 234th place, but it is Frodan, who we got to kind of highlight at the beginning of the event very, very well. And Leona is just one of the coolest legends in the game. Sadly, she just doesn't compete super well, but when it comes to trying to get the metallic, Frodan did end up taking it home, and that's what he came to do. Although he didn't make it day 2, and I'm sure he wanted to try and play in day 2, he still got to take home that metallic. I'm not going to go super in depth with the like actual deck itself, as it's already on social media and he's already talked about it in the content piece that we did with him. But if you're looking to play competitive Leona, just know that even prolific TFT players like Frodan also believe in a legend like this. So congratulations, Frodan, for taking it home. But everybody, that is going to be it for the Houston Riftbound Regional Qualifier. And I've said that so much this weekend that I'm kind of already tongue twistering it up. But if I didn't have the privilege to meet you this weekend, I'm so sorry. I hope to see you soon. And of course, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Comment down below on your favorite thing about the regional qualifier. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos just like this one. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.